In the election cacophony in the US, what went largely unnoticed by the media is the rancor generated within the Biden administration over Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Moscow to meet President Vladimir Putin. What has riled the US government is that Modi's visit on July 9th and meeting with Putin coincided with the NATO summit in Washington. What exacerbated the optics of Modi and Putin hugging it out even while Moscow was bombing a hospital in Kyiv, Ukraine, was that the NATO summit was primarily aimed at showcasing Biden's resolve against the Russian president. That Washington's much cherished strategic partner New Delhi chose to time the Modi visit such has not gone down well with Washington. In an excellently perceptive piece, well-known Washington-based journalist, writer and columnist Seema Sirohi wrote about how angry the Biden administration felt over the visit. Mayank Shah Report spoke to Seema to get a broader perspective. Welcome to Mayank Shah Report. Seema, it's a great pleasure to have you again.
Hi, Mayank. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure for me as well.
Thank you. Your excellent column in the Economic Times wondered if Washington is back to its old ways with India in the aftermath of Prime Minister Modi's visit to Russia, which was full of bonhomie, to meet Vladimir Putin. You write that Washington remains angry with New Delhi given that the visit coincided with President Biden's big outing, diplomatic outing as it were, during the NATO summit. Explain.
Okay, so the headline was a little more provocative than my article. And as you know, I don't write the headline. So yes, the Americans are quite upset that Prime Minister Modi went to Russia exactly at the time when NATO summit was happening. So it made for really bad optics from their point of view, from the US point of view. And at the same time, there was an attack by the Russians on a children's hospital in Ukraine, which made everything much worse. So apparently, the Americans had requested India to postpone the summit or at least not to have it at this time. But I don't know what happened about that, but I'm sure there was not too much choice in terms of the dates that Putin would give. Because the way I look at it, I'm sure the Russians wanted to make exactly this point that we have, India as a friend, and the prime minister is coming at this time, which was prearranged, I'm sure. So, everybody was playing the game from their point of view. I think India decided to accept the dates probably because they needed to renew the Russia relationship. Modi hadn't been there for a while. This is the first visit, I believe, in 5 years or so. While to the US, he has been coming regularly. So that's the background.
Okay. Had it not been for the election season that we are in the midst of and Biden's own shaky remainder of term, do you think Washington would have responded little more starkly than it has publicly?
I think Washington would have reacted the same way, whether Biden was on shaky grounds or having an excellent election campaign. I think this has more to do with how it looked to the rest of the world and how it looked in terms of unity against this war in Ukraine. And India, as you know, is a very important strategic partner for the United States. And for India to sort of have this summit at this time showed, from the American point of view, a little crack in that unity. I don't think it's related to Biden's election status. At that time, he was running and he hadn't decided to step away.
No, fair enough. My point was that given that it is the election season, they are preoccupied with domestic issues. Beyond a point, they wouldn't have pushed the issue with India too much at this time, since their focus is domestic rather than international.
Yes, but they are pushing it. Like I just recently spoke to someone in the State Department, and they said that yeah, there is still a lot of anger about the visit because the US had requested for a change of dates, and India ignored it for whatever reason.
Is it your sense that India may also have played into Putin's hand at this stage? I mean, you know that he gave Modi, bestowed him with the Order of St. Andrews the Apostle, which is sort of the highest honor that Russia gives out. Even as you pointed out, they were bombing uh, in Ukraine. The whole optics were rather weird from many different angles. Do you think India was aware of the craftiness that might have gone into all this?
I'm sure India was not aware of the attack because, that's just impossible for India to know. As for the medal, that was bestowed in 2019, and Modi hadn't been there, so it couldn't be sort of conferred on him physically. So this was one point of the visit that Putin would finally give him the order. That award was given before the war, before the Ukraine war.
Right.
So I don't know if India got played or India went into it fully aware that it needs to keep the channel open with Russia. I tend to think that it was fully aware.
In terms of Washington expressing its displeasure, what kind of feedback are you getting? What exactly are they telling New Delhi?
They're just complaining about, like the US ambassador Eric Garcetti in New Delhi said there is no strategic autonomy in times of war, basically implying that, you are with us or against us. That kind of rhetoric doesn't go down well with India at all. The Americans should know better
Right.
than to say things like that. And so, first, the Ministry of External Affairs did not react. Then there was some more commentary from here, from Washington, and then they finally reacted. There was some testimony on Capitol Hill in which, again, this issue was raised by the Assistant Secretary of State, Don Lu, that, they were not happy about Modi's visit to Russia. So finally, I guess Delhi had had enough, and they gave a statement 2 days ago.
You mentioned a sort of snarky observation by Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, that Russia would side with China any day over India. That's a. I mean, it is pretty sharp. Has there been any particular response from New Delhi on that?
No, there hasn't been specifically to that point, but in general, Indian diplomats say that their diplomacy with Russia is basically so that Russia is not completely isolated and, totally in the Chinese corner. So, Russia also doesn't want to be a junior partner in to China. The Indians believe that. The Americans don't. So that was what Jake Sullivan was saying, that if push came to shove, Russia would support China, take China's side and not India's side. Well, I don't know how he knows that for sure because, the Indians believe differently. Besides, I mean, what is the point of diplomacy if not to create space for yourself, for your country, for your interests? So that's what Indian diplomacy is aimed at. And I might say that that's exactly what US diplomacy is aimed at with Pakistan. I mean, why for the last 60 years or so, they keep feeding the beast in Pakistan? They are the hub of terrorism. They keep attacking India. They're groups based in Pakistan. And if US is truly a strategic partner of India's, and if it is the most consequential relationship, then surely uh, the Americans can come down a little bit on the Pakistanis. But no, their diplomacy is aimed at Pakistan to not let Pakistan go completely to China's side. That's exactly the same reason that India gives for Russia,
Right.
for keeping the channel open for Russia. So, why is it right in one case and wrong in the other? I don't get it.
But that's been the historical approach that the US has had on every major issue, including who can have nuclear weapons, right? US has always taken manifestly hypocritical positions on these issues. They are not going to change.
Right. Well, I'm sure the Indian diplomats get that. And so, therefore, they don't, they're doing what they think
Right.
is in their interest. So, the US can say what it wants. And so, that's where the relationship is right now. But I think the anger is subsiding in Washington. And because, this administration has only a few months left
Right.
before the elections, and they would like to achieve a few more things with India.
Right.
And because the partnership with India is basically to create a counter force or a counter, to China. Because both India and the US consider China the most important threat.
Right. How do you see a prospective Donald Trump administration, if it indeed comes to that, as being different from a prospective Kamala Harris administration on the India China dynamic?
I think there's bipartisan support for having strong relations with India. Both Republicans and Democrats agree on that. And also, both Republicans and Democrats agree that China is the preeminent threat for the United States. So, on that issue, I think there shouldn't be any problem, except for, it'll just continue the way it has been. Because remember, the whole China policy of the United States changed under Trump. There was this whole concept of Indo-Pacific that came into being. People forget that. It's not the creation of Biden. Biden built on it in a major way, of
Right.
course. So I don't see a major change, barring like a very unusual event of Donald Trump making a deal with Xi Jinping about something. The unpredictability of Donald Trump is the one thing that nobody can say anything about.
Right.
If it is Kamala Harris as president, perhaps there would be more more questions on human rights issues, etc., because she has taken that stand in the past. And with the progressives being a major part of the Democratic coalition now, those questions might get louder.
This is a bit speculative, but I would like you to engage in that a bit. How do you see the rise of Kamala Harris in the context of India, especially given that the Hindu right still remains in the saddle in Delhi, and a lot of them even here see her as sort of anti-India. You refer to her focus often on human rights, etc., because of their progressive leanings. Do you think India may be a bit anxious about the rise of Kamala Harris?
They may be, but I think the I don't know about the political class, but the diplomats in India would be prepared to deal with anyone who becomes president, and would look at that person not as Indian American. That's like the media obsession,
Right.
but more as a person of what kind of policies does she have, and that's more important. So in that sense, she would pursue the policies that she believes in. And I think that has very little to do with her heritage. I mean, all that becomes important during campaign time, but when it comes to governance,
Right.
I think there's also a permanent bureaucracy in the US that has a view on, certain things.
And finally, to wrap it up, completely unrelated to what we are talking about, what's your gut sense on her prospects? She seems to be, I mean, it's her opening has been blockbuster from the fundraising standpoint in terms of jumping in polls, etc. What's your sense in Washington?
Well, as I like to say it, she has given the Democrats a reason to live. The
Yes.
campaign, has got energized. There's no question about it. But these are just the first few days. Um let's see, let the polling begin. There'll be
Right.
polls in the next few weeks as she articulates her positions. She has to define herself. Right now the Republicans are defining her as this ultra uber liberal person from California. I mean, remember, being from California is not always a blessing in politics in
No.
America. So she will have to fight that battle. Right now, yes, there is a lot of support for her. The Democrats are energized, which they weren't when Biden was a candidate. And they were very dismayed and despondent. But now there is this new energy, there is new money, more importantly. All
$126 million already, and 60% small donors. That's astonishing, isn't that?
Yes, it is. So the Black community is energized. Maybe the exodus, or not exodus is the wrong word. The Black men were apparently moving to the Republican Party.
Right.
That may be stemmed with her at the top of the ticket.
Yeah.
And, her aim would be that. But Black women are totally energized. There was like 44,000 people women on a Zoom call, and they raised $1.5 million in that call alone.
It's amazing. Yeah.
That was less than 24 hours after Biden stepped away. So yes, there's new energy, but there's a long time to voting day, and anything can happen.
Right. Right.
She's running neck and neck with Trump right now.
Right.
She's doing 1 point or 2 points better than Biden against Trump. But it's not like she is ahead of Trump by 5 or 6 points yet.
No, she's not.